Thank you, everyone. We will start the meeting. Thank you. So I declare the Council Agenda Briefing Forum of the 13th of July 2021, held in Council Chambers at the City of Subiaco, open at, 5:34 p.m. I welcome councillors, staff, the media and members of the community. On behalf of the City of Subiaco, I acknowledge the Wadja people as the traditional custodians of the area. We recognise their cultural connection to the land and waterways of Subiaco and their continuing contribution to our city. Please note this meeting is being recorded and live streamed. By being present at this meeting, members of the public consent to the possibility that their image and voice may be live streamed to the public. Recordings will be made available on the City's website following the meeting. Confidential sections of council meetings will not be live streamed or recorded. So welcome, councillors and member of the gallery. The Mayor has put in her apologies, and so I'll be presiding the meeting. We also have apologies from Councillor David McMullen, Councillor Jodie Mansfield, Councillor Derek Nash and Councillor Murray Rowe. Are there any other apologies? Well, we have one from the Mayor, and we're not sure about Councillor Davis at this stage. Sorry, welcome to all staff as well. Leave of absence. I understood actually that I was told this afternoon that Councillor Mansfield was actually on leave, so he might need to adjust that. But yeah. Point 3, disclosure of interest. Are there any disclosures of interest? No, thank you. There are no approved deputations. CEO, do you want to actually read the conditions of interest statement?
Don't think there's a need to tonight.
Okay, thank you. Announcements by the presiding member. There is none. Reports, number 6, reports of committees and officers. So if we move on to 6.2, office reports for discussion. Let's start with C1. Do I have any questions? Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Jennings.
Thank you, Deputy Ms Stroud. The ongoing costs, could you just give the $25,100 plus GST ongoing or annual costs? What is that, like a licensing fee, or could you just explain that a little bit? Thank you.
Thank you, and through you, presiding member, the ongoing costs are discussed. It's on the following page after the figure. So it talks about the licensing fee. So there's a licensing fee, and there are some costs in inserting a developer's model into the base model. So we just averaged out the number of DAP applications and got a quotation on how much that would be. So that's where that comes from.
Thank you, and through you, Deputy Mayor, another question about that. It says the software enables, amongst other things, visualising and measuring the overshadowing, and is that a dynamic model, or it's just a fixed model for like one time of the day at one time of the year, or how does that work, just out of interest and briefly?
Thank you, and through you, presiding member, we understand it to be dynamic model, so you can choose different times of the year, the solstice, equinox, and so forth.
Any more questions? Thank you, Councillor Powell.
Yes, thank you, through you, presiding member. The cost, 45,000 plus 25,000. I thought we'd been told in the past that the reason for a delay in 3D modelling was that the cost was prohibitive. So essentially, is this regarded as a prohibited price for it? Thank you.
Thank you, and through presiding member, and that's up to the council to consider. Now, I think previous advice was based on the City of Perth's model and how they did it. So they have a very substantial model. We believe they have two people, or understand they have two people working on it full time, and it is a very detailed methodology and additional hardware essentially needed to be able to run it and compute it. So that's probably where the previous advice came from. We did some more work on this and worked with other local governments who have started to do it, and I think City of Canning was the other one, and South Perth as well. And we've come up with a solution that is not so high and not so prohibitive in our recommendation.
Yes, I recall, thank you, Councillor Powell, references to hundreds of thousands of dollars. So looks like the staff have done very well here on this initiative. Any other questions on C1? I'm not shutting it down yet. C2, the draft amended local planning policy 3.5, development guidelines for places included on the heritage list. Do we have any questions on this item? Thank you, Councillor Powell.
Yes, thank you. It seems to be a very long list of requirements or preferences in the for the heritage housing. I'm just wondering if perhaps the extensiveness of it might be a little bit proscriptive. You know, might actually deter people from taking on heritage renovations. I mean, I'm looking at things like the facadism, and especially on page 13, I noticed under roofs that replacing gutters and downpipes, the original shapes and profiles should be reinstated. Now, even getting profiles for that sort of stuff that's 20 years old is very, very difficult. So I'm wondering, you know, is that really... Are people going to be able to do it, or will it be a disincentive?
Thank you, and through your presiding member. The changes to this policy come about with legislative changes and our planning framework changes. So what's actually required isn't changing from what's in there in the current policy. Given that it applies to the heritage list, so it's not heritage areas, it's individually listed properties, there is a very good understanding most times of property owners of what maintaining that heritage property entails, and the city's heritage incentives through providing advice through a heritage expert architect helps to determine the built form that can be undertaken. So we don't think it's prohibitive. We're not really changing what needs to occur in these areas or for heritage listed properties. This policy and the reason for bringing it to council is just to update it with the new Heritage Act and the new planning framework.
Any more questions? Thank you, councillors. Moving on to C3, the draft amended local planning policy 7.5, planning compliance consideration post advertising. Do we have any questions on this item? Okay, thank you. Moving on to C4, draft amended local planning policy 8.2, advertisements, signs, preparation for public advertising. Do we have any questions on this item? Thank you, Councillor Jennings.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor, and through you. I noticed that in the objectives for the policy, it refers to a few things, but amenity is one of them, but it doesn't refer to safety. And when I first read it, that's what I thought, I thought it might have something about safety or refer to safety. Then further into the policy, actually in section or clause 6 and 6.2.2, it does talk about safety. there. So I'm just wondering, you know, if one of the clauses there is about ensuring or to do with safety, should it be a provision in the objectives as well, or refer to safety? Thanks.
Thank you, and through you, Deputy Mayor Stroud. So policy objective 1E talks about that the objectives of the policy are to ensure that advertisements do not present a hazard or obstruction to pedestrians or block motorists' views of traffic, information, signs or traffic lights. So it's probably picked up in there if you'd like to. We can take it on board to consider an additional broader term of safety in that. That's something that we can consider in finalising this for the agenda next week.
Thank you. I know it's not a debate here, but it's fine with me if it's not, but I just wondered if it was by omission rather than sort of you decided not to put it in there, that was all. So I'm not that fussed either way, but just want to mention it. Thanks.
Any more questions? Okay, thank you, councillors. Moving on to C5, awarding of tender A621 concrete pathworks, including curbing and other miscellaneous works. Do we have any questions on this item? Thank you, Councillor Hammersley.
Thanks. This is just more a curiosity question than anything. In the report, it refers to the city's current contract for concrete pathwork, but I may have missed it, but I don't think it mentions who that was with. And I was just wondering who that might be.
Through you, Deputy Mayor Stroud. Currently is with Cobblestone Concrete.
Yeah, so that leads me on to my second question. Just when we do go out to tender, do we have a system to ensure that there's not a sort of bias towards a current contractor? Is that managed through the assessment process?
Through you, Deputy Mayor Stroud. That is managed through the tender evaluation process, so there's no bias in regards to that. It's on a qualitative and quantitative process across all the tenders.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor, through you. It's a quite a general, bit left field question in some ways. Well, this is about a lot of concrete that's going to be laid in the city, and one of the tender criteria was, sustainability, but that might be the operations of the contractor themselves as opposed to the concrete itself. Is there anywhere or any way that the city can obtain more environmentally friendly concrete? I don't know if we can even get that in WA, but in other places you can get that kind of concrete with fly ash and various things added that make it less carbon intensive, carbon dioxide emitting in the production of the concrete. Yes, so is there any such thing available?
Through you, Deputy Mayor Stroud. We're always working with our contractors in regard to looking at environmental ways in which to improve, whether it be concrete. I'm not currently aware of environmentally sustainable concrete, although there are some reuse issues in regards to demolition that can be used in regards to those areas. But yeah, we do deal a lot with our contractors, and anything that comes new onto the market, we certainly review.
I just wonder if then perhaps maybe the question was asked in the tender documents, but if we don't know that, could an inquiry just be made to see if there's anything? I mean, it may well increase the cost as well, so that will all change things, but if that could just be, the question could be asked, that would be great. Thank you.
Did you want to say anything? No. Do we have any more questions on this item? Okay, thank you, councillors. Moving on to C6, financial statements and reports for the month ending the 31st of May 2021. Thank you, Councillor Vellin.
Yes, I was reading through the annual report today, and I've got a couple of questions. Some of them might need to be taken on notice. The first one, reading through the annual report, the 2020 annual report is dated October 2020 on page 4. I'm wondering if that's the correct date. Doesn't seem.
Thank you. And through you, Presiding Member, can you just clarify, is that in regard to the annual report? Because this is actually the monthly financials that we're dealing with.
Yeah, that's regarding the annual report.
Okay, so that item isn't on this agenda at this point.
Okay. I've got some questions. Is that it? Yeah. So question 2, there's 133 Salvato Road in Subiaco was sold and settled in July 2020. That's on page 42. The property was purchased from state government by 12 million. What was the profit made on the transaction? And then just following that up, because in the capital investment account, it shows it's an opening balance of around 23.4 million, and there's a transfer of 1.2 million in the actuals, but the budget shows that there's a transfer of 18 million. So I'm wondering, can you remind me and ratepayers of what these two transactions represent? That's 18 million in the budget and then an actual of 1.2 million.
Through you, Presiding Member. Again, this item is in relation to the financials, the monthly financials, but I can actually give you responses to both of those questions. The item you're referring to for transfers to reserves are actually the adopted budget. So the adopted budget was in relation to proceeds on sale of property. So when we sell a property, the proceeds actually go into the capital investment reserve. And so that ties back to the question that you raised earlier about the timing of when the settlement occurred on that property. The $1.2 million that you referred to was an item previously that came through council through a budget review, and it related to funds that the city secured through a class action suit with other councils in relation to term deposits that the city made some losses on quite a few years ago, and that we were successful in actually recouping some of those funds through those class actions with the bank.
No? Any more questions on this item? Okay, thank you, councillors. That completes the public part of this agenda. So we will now move to closing the chambers to the public. Okay, we can now come to item 8. I declare the City of Subiaco Council Gender Briefing Forum of the 13th of July 2021 closed at 5:58 p.m. Thank you.